Dennis and Brian on whether America is headed for a second sports shutdown due to coronavirus. Join the conversation by commenting live on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch. This is the Fifth Chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spitting the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth Chapter.
That's right. Welcome to the Fifth Chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian. And I'll say this, Dennis, my Penn State Nittany Lions, they're 0-2. They're heading to Maryland to play Maryland this weekend. And if Penn State gets up by just a 7-0 lead in the first quarter, I will demand that they stop counting the points. Just end it right there.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if you go back and count the all-time wins between Michigan and Michigan State, make that the deciding factor on who wins the game this past Saturday. Michigan ended up getting cheated. They actually, didn't lose the game.
Yeah, they had to throw in all those illegal points that shouldn't have been counted. Definitely want to thank everybody out there who's ready for 5 fantastic chapters in episode 52, taking a little break from the election and all the nonsense and who's winning, who's losing. We still don't have a winner yet, but thanks to everyone out there who is watching on YouTube, on Facebook Live, or on Twitch. Also want to thank those who are listening to the podcast via Apple, Google, and Spotify. Of course, you can download the podcast a little before 10 o'clock on the day of each show, or around 10 o'clock. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and participate in each show by sending in your feedback via Facebook Live and via YouTube. Dennis will be reading your comments throughout the duration of the show. Let's take a look at today's book. In the second chapter, we will be talking a little Michigan football and keys to victory against the Indiana Hoosiers. Michigan goes into the game as a 3-point road favorite. We know that's a big key because Michigan has never won as an underdog under Jim Harbaugh. In the third chapter, Lavar Ball says that he wants LaMelo Ball to be drafted by the Pistons or the Knicks. Should the Pistons trade up from number 7 to get him? The Knicks, by the way, have the number 8 pick in the draft. In the fourth chapter, the coronavirus is spreading like wildfire. Where everybody's paying attention to the election, it's spreading like wildfire. New records in Michigan, new records across the country. Sports teams shutting down facilities and canceling games. Are we headed toward a second sports shutdown in 2020? And then, it says in the fifth chapter we got story time. That's fake news. We're actually going to do the major wager, so don't pay attention to what it says right there. Fake news in the fifth chapter. We've got the major wager. But Dennis, let's start off with the first chapter, and that takes us to the same old Lions. Their season's over at 3-4. We've established that. They do have to play 9 more games, assuming that the coronavirus allows them to do so. They travel to Minnesota this weekend to take on the 2-5 Vikings. The Vikings just beat the Packers 28-22 thanks to 4 touchdowns by Dalvin Cook. The Lions just lost by 20 points to the Colts, but that's not where the bad news stops. As we discussed on Tuesday, Kenny Golladay and Trey Flowers will miss the game with injuries. Yesterday, Matt Stafford missed practice. Later on in the day, we found out that he missed practice because he was placed on the COVID-19 list because he came into close contact with someone who had tested positive on Monday. That means he can't practice all week. That means for him to play on Sunday, he will need to test negative for 5 consecutive days without seeing his teammates on the field. And then if he tests positive at any one of those days, he's out. If he tests negative every single day, then he can catch a private flight, I believe, on Saturday to Minnesota to join his teammates. This is huge because the Lions last year were 0-9 without Stafford. And with Chase Daniel and David Blau as the potential backup quarterbacks. The Lions need Stafford if they want a chance to win, if you're hoping this team does not tank like a no-limit soldier. Dennis, what do you think about this Stafford news and how it affects their ability to win on Sunday?
Well, if he's not there, like, the interest level goes way down and just watching the game. But you know what? They went out and threw all that money at Chase Daniel, more than a bunch of quarterbacks that you would rather see in here, like Jameis Winston or Cam Newton. You know, there's
Colin
even though
Kaepernick.
the red Rifle down there in Dallas, although he looked terrible when he was in there. But you know, I think he could probably win one game for him. So,
there we go.
Yeah, I had to work. It was technical difficulty. I worked through it. So, I think they could. The idea with a guy like Chase Daniel is you're not going to do good in the long haul, but he's going to be better than Blau or anybody else they had yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's the idea of signing Chase Daniel. I was surprised. I looked back. I was looking at a story earlier today. I didn't realize, or I guess maybe I forgot, that the Lions signed him to a 3-year contract. That's a pretty long deal for a guy who's been a career backup, and you figure at some point you'd be able to upgrade on him in the near future in terms of backup quarterback. But before I get to that, let me I've got a funny story for you. I posted it on Twitter, and I told you before the show that I'd share it with you during the show. So yesterday afternoon, I woke up and I was scrolling through Twitter, and I saw that Stafford wasn't at practice, and there was no explanation. So, before I started Ubering, after I ate my cereal, I said, let me go down to the casino and put some money on the Vikings, because this is kind of strange. They're already without Golladay, already without Trey Flowers. Let me just go put some money on the Vikings -4 before that line changes. So I get in there, I put some money on the Vikings to cover, and I'm in good shape. I go back to the parking lot, get in my car, and within like 10 seconds I hear breaking news: Matt Stafford's on the COVID-19 list. And obviously I wasn't happy that he's on the COVID-19 list. I don't want anybody on there, and I hope that he's negatives, but I was happy that I got the bet in before they were able to change the line, and I decided, let me go back in there and put some more money on the Vikings because he might not play. And by the time I got back in there, the game was taken off the board. So I was happy to, at the very least, have gotten that money in before they took the game off the board. Who knows what the line's going to be like when they bring the line back later this week. But, I think based on that bet, everybody out there knows where I stand on this game. And in terms of my confidence in Blau or Chase Daniel to win a game for the Lions, they lost by 20 points this past week against the Colts, with Kenny Golladay playing for half the game, Trey Flowers playing for most of the game, and Matt Stafford playing for all of the game. If they don't have any of those players for any part of this game, while the Vikings just got an excellent performance out of Dalvin Cook and company to beat the Packers in Green Bay, this is going to be ugly. It's going to be another double-digit loss on a same old Lions Sunday. If they want any shots against a Viking team that's been underperforming this year but has a poor record, they have to have Stafford on the field. I think that I certainly don't know if he's going to test positive, because obviously there's an incubation period and things like that. But assuming he tests negative all throughout the week and can play on Sunday, there's still no guarantee that he's going to be as good as he would have been if he was in practice all week. As a matter of fact, you can almost certainly assume that he's going to be a lesser Matt Stafford than if he was at practice all week. Otherwise, they would never have him practice. There's a reason why teams want players to practice and get ready for the game. So either you're going to see no Matt Stafford, which is a problem if you want wins, or a lesser Matt Stafford, which is a problem if you want wins.
Yeah, what number did you get the Vikings at?
-4.
-4.
Yeah. That was looking good even if Stafford was going to play. But then when I saw that he was missing practice for no reason, I was like, hey, that's potentially 3 starters down. Put that money on the Vikings.
Yeah, you take Golladay. I guess you do this with any team in the NFL. You take your number 1 wide receiver out, and then you start looking at it. It doesn't look very good. But with the Lions, it doesn't look very good. I mean, I know Marv Jones had a touchdown last game, but he has been disappointing this year. I mean, if he'd have done anything, I think they may have moved him at the trading deadline. And, Danny Amendola and the other guys that they got, not a whole lot there. It's
Hawkinson
really,
had a nice game against the Colts.
Hawkinson's okay. Right about now, you wish they would have had the proper evaluation on Travis Fulgham. He's out there,
Yeah.
and really he's tearing it up. I mean, like you draft a guy and he's out there tearing it up, and you know what? That's just a missed evaluation by you. You did a good job drafting him, but you got to be able to keep those guys. I mean, there's been other players like that the Lions have, had interest in, brought in, and then they've kicked them loose and they went on with other teams and had success. I mean, this is one of those things where if you're Bob Quinn, I mean, it's up to him. Like, you'd rather have Fulgham. He's as good as, maybe they would have traded Kenny Golladay if Fulgham would have been on here. But, that's one of the things that stands out with this team. And, I think the overall interest in this game coming up Sunday, I mean, even when they had Stafford, you look at it, it was just such a disappointment. Last week was a chance to show whether they were contenders or pretenders. I mean, they had won those 2 garbage games, but they put themselves in position, like, say, okay, hey, we're home. We're going to show everybody that, we're serious about at least hanging in there. And then they didn't show up, and you know what? You
that
laugh.
7-point lead.
You laugh, and, now the NFL's talking about, letting 8 teams in. So, the Lions will be there at, with 5 wins with 2 games to go, talking about, hey, we are in playoff contention. If we win both of these, that would be just like
but no, not this year, because they're the number 10 seed. I mean, there's so many teams that are a heck of a lot better than them right now, including the defending NFC champion 49ers that are 4-4 and playing tonight. I mean, they could right now be 4-3, and I think they'd only be the 9 seed. So
that would just be one away. That's playoff contention.
Yes,
no?
that would be playoff contention. That's true, but you can't be when you're 3-4. That's for certain. But you brought up Kenny Golladay, and I was looking at the Lions' production this year without Kenny Golladay. Obviously, he missed the first 2 games. Yeah, missed the first 2 games. They lost by 4 and 21 points, and then in the last game, he didn't have a catch, and they lost by 20 points. Now, obviously, the defense played poorly in all 3 of those games, and you can't fault Golladay for that. And all 3 of those teams that they lost to have winning records. But without Golladay, they're losing by an average of 15 points per game. So when you look at, Danny Amendola has been pretty nice for a 3 receiver. He's actually played better than Jones. He's been a 2 receiver. And you see that T.J. Hawkinson is starting to look like maybe a low-end first-round pick. Those are positives. But if you got Stafford not practicing all week and you don't have a big play receiver outside of the 1 bomb per game that you can get from Marvin Hall, which last game came in absolute garbage time, there's not much of an opportunity. I think that the best chance for the Lions is going to be for that run defense to continue to stiffen up, because it has been better recently, and to somehow stop Dalvin Cook on 1st and 2nd down and put Kirk Cousins into obvious throwing downs on 3rd down. He has 10 interceptions this year, which I believe is leading the NFL. If you force him into obvious passing downs where it's not just a dink and dunk and he has to actually attempt a pass of 10 or 15 yards, then perhaps he'll have an opportunity. But, if Dalvin Cook's getting 5-6 yards on 1st down, if they're getting 5 or 6 yards, whether it's Dalvin Cook or not on 1st down, then the Lions are going to be in big trouble, and I expect them to be in big trouble.
Yeah, I do too. Justin Jefferson, the rookie out of LSU, he's no joke. We know Thielen, what he can do. That just presents, and they got 2 good tight ends. The Vikings do. That offense just against that Lions defense, and then Cook, man, like the way he's going right now. I see the feedback right now. I see a lot of Cook here on the feedback. Let's read some of it. Jerry C. on Facebook says it's a guaranteed loss this weekend. Cook will run all over them. They need to get rid of Quinn Tricia at the end of the year and start looking for the next regime. Yeah, well, Jerry, that is the idea. I think a lot of fans are looking at the next regime. They're looking past that. That's what happened when you lose that first game like they did against the Bears and you get blown out against the Packers. People have been thinking about it for a while here, but they had a chance, and then Sunday, they're right back to where, yeah, it should be over at the end of the year.
Well, and a lot of folks are constantly looking at the Detroit Lions and the Quinn Trisha era and saying, well, is this going to be an excuse to bring them back? People have been saying all year, is the coronavirus pandemic going to be a reason why Sheila Ford Ham says, well, we got to give them another chance because, there was a pandemic, so you really can't evaluate anybody. I wonder if this Sunday, if Matt Stafford can't play because he either tests positive and it's a real positive, or he tests positive and it's a false positive, if that game, which would end up almost going from 90% to 99% chance ending up in a loss, if that could be used as rationale by Sheila Ford or by Quinn and Patricia to say, hey, we didn't have Stafford for the Vikings game, we would have won that. If we had won that game, then we would have been in playoff contention come week 14, and that's all you wanted us to do so that we could keep our job, so just let us keep our job.
That's some straight up Lions logic, but you know what? I've seen it happen before. I mean, last year they used it. Like when Stafford was out, they were throwing things around like MVP caliber performance by Matt Stafford until he got hurt, and then the Lions record, but when he was out, it was all like they were really cooking, but they weren't really cooking. I mean, he had some nice numbers, but they were below 500 when he went out. So it was a false narrative, but it didn't matter, man. The Lions jumped all over that about with Stafford and without Stafford and MVP caliber pace and all of these things about, their QB. But that little bit of Lions logic, I think they could have 8 playoff teams. I swear they could have 5 wins. They could have 4 wins with 2 games to go. And I think the Fords would look at it and say, well, we did say playoff contention. If they win both of these games, and 4 or 5 different things could happen, technically that is playoff contention. They can do whatever they want.
So you're saying 4 wins with 2 games to go, meaning they'd be 4-10, which means between now and then they could go 1-6, and you think Sheila Ford would say, "Hey, that's playoff contention."
I think there's a possibility that the Fords, like they've done so many stupid things over the years, like you laugh about it, but Martha Ford did some really stupid things right off the bat, coming in about talking about her love for Jim Caldwell. And, her late husband, he had about 5 things that we could sit around mentioning that you would say, oh, no one would ever do that. Well, that's what he did all the time. He would stay, and that's the thing. If there's one thing with the Fords, like they it's not like they move on quickly from people. They just keep them around way too long. And so we'll see. We don't know about
unless you're a winning black coach. Oh, you had back-to-back winning seasons. Poof, I love you, but you're gone.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why I picked them. There was a part about me, like I did think that they had a shot. I thought they were in that group of 7-9, 9-7 teams this year. And I did pick them to go 9-7. But just a little bit of part of that was thinking that, hey, could they be 9-7, not make the playoffs? And then, here's Quinn talking about 9-7 wasn't good enough, for Jim Caldwell, but it would be good enough for him to get some kind of extension or something. So that would have been really Lion-esque as well. There was a part about that picking 9-7 that the irony of that wasn't lost on me.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of things would be hard to rule out. That's for certain.
Here's some more feedback. Keith, I'm going to say number 1 Fifth Chapter fan, Keith, coming in here on YouTube, it says Dalvin Cook will eat the Lions up. After last week's performance, he'll probably only have 3 TDs. Who cares about Stafford? Just saying. Playing any of these games. No Golladay either. I predict a double-digit loss. That's from Keith. Reno says Hawkinson, 12 receptions and 2 TDs. Just saying.
Okay, he might get those 2 TDs when the Lions are down 35-7 in the fourth quarter.
Reno's a fantasy expert. I know who he is, man. He's a fantasy guru, so maybe he's talking about from a fantasy standpoint.
And if Golladay is out, somebody's got to catch passes. Golladay was out for the end of most of the last game, and guess who caught passes? Golladay was one of those guys.
That's what Reno's saying. Without Golladay, those receptions have to go somewhere, and I'm sure they're going to be playing from behind. Ooh, good point there. Game script way behind. Chase Daniel has to throw the ball to somebody. Key says, I have Hawk on my fantasy team and would love to see it, but trying to predict the Lions, Jesse James will probably get the targets. Greg says the last few weeks,
Penn State.
We have to stop the run, though. We'll see. And Reno says, I just lost Kittle, and I have Hawk too. This is going to be a breakout game for the young man. Well, you know what? The point about, if you just look at the pass catchers that are available here for the Lions, whether it's going to be Stafford or whether it's going to be Daniel, Hawkinson has, you would think without Golladay there, that whether it's fantasy or whether it's, just on the field availability there for the Lions on Sunday, I can see Hawk having a pretty good game.
Yeah, there's an opportunity for him. And he's, while a lot of Lions fans were angry that they drafted him at number 8, he's not a bust like slippery finger tight end Eric Ebron was. He's disappointing in that you wanted somebody else and there were other better players to take, but he hasn't been a bad football player. This year has been an okay to, looking like perhaps a pretty good tight end.
Yeah, you can always say you'd rather have the combination of Devin Bush and a different tight end in the second round, or
Irv Smith.
Irv Smith, that would have been a good one. I would have taken that. I would still take that, even though Devin Bush is out right now for
Ed
the year.
Oliver.
Yeah, Ed Oliver's taking a step back. Those were the two. Those were the two guys that I wanted over Hawk. I didn't want Hawkinson in the top 10. I would have passed on that. Hard pass. But, yeah, he hasn't been a bust. You're right about that.
All right, let's turn the page to the second chapter.
That gets us to college football and takes us to Saturday, where the 23rd ranked Michigan Wolverines will travel to Bloomington to take on the 13th ranked Indiana Hoosiers. And as you very well know, Brian, they're 2-0. The Indiana Hoosiers, they beat Rutgers last week in week 1. I forgot. They beat Penn State.
Yeah, thanks to a replay review where the ball hit out of bounds before hitting the pylon, and they said, well, maybe the other end of the ball perhaps got past, whatever.
Michigan got cheated last week against Michigan State. I don't know. I'm doing my best Donald Trump there.
They needed to stop counting the points, even though Michigan State had the lead for the entirety of the game.
That's a very good point. If they would have just not counted as many points for Michigan State and counted more of Michigan's points, then Michigan would have been able to win that game.
There were a lot of illegal catches by Ricky White. Why did they allow those illegal catches to go through? Somebody needs to investigate.
Why didn't they just let Michigan play another quarter or two, and so they could have caught up and then actually have won the game? I think that's
whose idea is it to have only 4 quarters in a game? Why not 5 or 6?
Yeah, Michigan got cheated out of that game. But now, like they, however you want to put it, backs are against the wall. They're desperate, but they are the favorite against the Hoosiers. Who do you like? Is this a big game for Michigan in your mind?
I think it's I think it is a big game for Michigan, and it's certainly bigger if they lose than if they win. I look at Michigan as being a 3-point favorite, and obviously we joked about this a little bit at the start of the show, but had they been an underdog, that'd be a guarantee that they would lose because they've never won a game under Harbaugh as an underdog. I think that if Michigan loses this game, well, if Michigan wins the game, then I think it's what the fan base expects, because a lot of it is going to be, well, Indiana is perennially a bad team. Therefore, we're Michigan. We have to beat them. There's really no argument, no reason to discuss. It's Indiana football. I think if Michigan wins the game, by a hair, by a field goal, by the edge of a football, as it bounces out of bounds like Penn State, then I think Michigan fans are going to be a little bit more concerned, and they'll still be troubled like they were after the Michigan State game. But if they lose convincingly by a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, something like that, whatever slappies there are that are hanging on to Harbaugh are going to have a really hard time defending him. Whether it's about we need to fire Harbaugh now, which I think a lot of fans will say. They'll say, who cares about giving him a graceful exit and allowing him to just accept the phone call from the Jets in December, or whatever the case may be. They're going to say you can't lose to Michigan State and Indiana in the same year, especially a bottom feeder Michigan State team. I think that there's going to be a big call for him to go. The Big Blues and all that, they're going to say, look, the time is up. We can't have him be a lame duck going into next year. It's time to move on. So from that standpoint, it is a big game. Michigan Michigan can't lose this game. And on top of that, both of these teams are flawed. We know about Michigan, and a lot of people watching know about Michigan, especially if they're Michigan fans following this show. They saw what happened with Michigan and Michigan State last week, but Indiana's a pretty flawed team as well, despite being the number 13 team of the country. That's why they're a home underdog. I mean, if you look at the game against Penn State, they had 16 total first downs and 211 total yards. They also turned it over twice. Defensively, they gave up 488 yards to Penn State. They won that game because of the final call, the 10 penalties on Penn State, and the 3 turnovers by Penn State in the first half. Michael Penix Jr. had a heck of a lot of hype going into this year, but so far he's completed only 58% of his passes, despite one of those games being against Rutgers. They beat Rutgers on the road by 16, which is nice, but the offensive numbers still weren't great against them. Only 347 yards against Rutgers, 2 of 12 on third down against Rutgers. Only one more first down for the game against Rutgers. They won the turnover battle 3-0 against Rutgers and only won by 16. This is a flawed team.
Yeah, well, a couple things just to go back to Harbaugh. I mean, talking about firing him, if you want to sound like you know what you're talking about firing Jim Harbaugh during the season, even if they lose to Indiana, even if they lose to Wisconsin, let me go ahead and give you the chance and the probability that Michigan would fire Jim Harbaugh during a pandemic, during the season.
I'm just talking about the talk of firing him.
Well, the talk would be fine, but those people are just like, you could talk about him leaving after the season, which, there actually is a path where Jim Harbaugh, after this year, if there's enough important Michigan people that don't want him to be the coach anymore, I think that he will look to the NFL. He will be, if they would lose the next 2 games, behind the scenes, that would be happening, and there would be a real chance that he would take that NFL job. But it's stupid to talk about him getting fired. That is not going to happen. I can, even at the end of the season, Jim Harbaugh is in the position where he can take an NFL job or he can take another college football job. He is not going to get fired. I mean, he can leave, and there's a possibility that can happen. But I'm with you on Indiana. You know what? I like Scott, the running back. I like Phil Yora, the wide receiver, the tight end, even though he dropped one against you guys. That was a huge one late. I mean, they've got some weapons, and, Penix can fire the ball. He didn't look great against you guys until the final drive, which he really didn't look great there. His receivers just really stepped up and caught these contested passes. But, yeah, I think Michigan, because they're completely desperate, and if they lose this one, man, the season, I know it already feels like it's lost, but, man, things can get out of hand really quick here. I like Michigan to win the game.
I think it's going to be a good game, but I think that Indiana is going to win. Certainly, you look at the 3 points from a sports betting standpoint. I think that it makes sense to take that. But, I mean, you look at a couple of flawed teams. Michigan having a down game last week against a bad football team. Indiana, I guess, starting to improve their offense a little bit, but still looking pretty bad. I think it could be an ugly game, but I like Indiana to win. And, one big reason is because who's going to stop Whop Philyor? We saw that Ricky White had almost 200 yards receiving against Vincent Gray and company. So I think the biggest key for Michigan in this game is going to be stopping Whop Philyor. We know that Michigan's supposed to have a very good pass rush. I think the number 2 key to a Michigan victory is for Hutchinson, Pay, if he plays, and those blitzing linebackers to bounce back from 0 sacks against Michigan State. And then, who's going to be more accurate? Is it going to be Penix or is it going to be Milton? Milton was not accurate in that Michigan State game, and if Penix is more accurate than Milton, then it's advantage Hoosiers.
Yeah, those are all good points. Pay's up, by the way, so he'll be good to go in that game. I think Daxton Hill will be on Whop Philyor. They line him up in the slot. I think it's up to Nick Sheridan to do what Minnesota did not do, and that is take the Gophers should have taken Rashad Bateman and put him on the outside away from Daxton Hill in the slot. Maybe Michigan would have followed him over there, and maybe they'll do that with Philyor coming up on Saturday. But I would think Sheridan would, after watching the tape, and if Michigan's going to, stay on this, stupid press coverage and leaving their guys out on an island, yeah, they'll be taking shots all day, just like Michigan State did. And, the big part of Michigan here You understand it a little bit. Like they completely took Michigan State lightly. That retrospect, that was a really stupid thing to do because they got shocked. But I think they were looking at this game against Indiana and Wisconsin, and they thought that they could just handle the Spartans here. And they also thought like they could have this more of a conservative game plan with Joe Milton. But you know what? Joe Milton, all off season, all I heard about is how strong his arm was and he can throw the ball a million miles. He's had 3 deep passes, and none of them have been in the area code of the wide receivers. If he is any good, you got to use the length of the field. You got to be able to throw with accuracy down the field. I want to see if Joe Milton really can cook. I want to see if he can make it rain. And this is the particular game. You know, there's no more protecting a guy in his 3rd game after you get a loss. Get out there and let it fly. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing I'm going to see. And you know what? It's the one thing about this staff where if they, even with the Michigan State loss, if they can really show some progress offensively, and almost all of that's going to have to do with Joe Milton taking gigantic steps forward, I would think that would have to start Saturday.
Well, and the other thing is, what happened to Ronnie Bell? It's been 2 weeks, and he was their most proven receiver coming into this season. Obviously, losing DPJ, going to the NFL early for no reason. Nico Collins is skipping the season. Tariq Black decided to leave. But Ronnie Bell, I believe he was their leading receiver last year, and he's just kind of been a nobody. He was just another guy on the football field. If I'm a Michigan fan, I'd like to see him come up with 6-7 catches, 110 yards against the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I think they approach this season like, hey, we got 4 backs, we've got 6 wide receivers, we've got a bunch of tight ends here. Let's let everybody eat a little bit here. Let's spread it out. And that was fine against Minnesota. It's like, hey, everybody's getting a chance to get in there. Everybody's, they're spreading the wealth here. But against Michigan State, suddenly it's like, now you can't play 4 backs. Pick one and let him go and see what happens there. You want to get a change of pace guy? That's fine. It's the same thing with a wide receiving core. They've got 6 guys, including 2 true freshmen. Pare that down. You know what? Who are the 3 best guys? And start targeting them more. And you know what? Ronnie Bell is one of those 3 guys. Giles Jackson, he is one of those guys. I think Cornelius Johnson, he's one of those guys.
Yeah, he might be.
Get those 3 guys. He's got the size over everybody else. He's 6'3". Use, your top 3 wide receivers and stop spreading the wealth. I mean, you got to change up. Once you lose and you get exposed, you get slapped upside the head, all of this, we're going to let everybody play, and we're going to just spread it around like it's a spring game. No, that didn't work. Against MSU, it's different now. Find your best players and go to them.
Yep, you got some feedback?
Yes. Let's see here. Paul's ready for hockey, and Paul, you know what? He says 3 periods is better than 4 quarters this year. College hockey for the win. I will be on a Zoom. I saw Michigan's schedule come out. November 11th, I think they open up against just this year, a Big Ten foe, Arizona State, and
Big Ten foe, Arizona State.
It's a reality. I'm just telling you that Arizona State's in the Big Ten this year. They needed another team, and
BTN trying to get that Phoenix, Arizona market.
They got Arizona State, so the Sun Devils are in. That's who they open up with, and I'll be on some Zooms next week in some college hockey, Paul. So I'll have some more info for you coming up next week. Let's see here what everybody else is saying on YouTube about the Michigan game. Keith says Harbum has to go. I'm sick of this crap. Losing to MSU, losing to ranked teams, just being mediocre. He's been here for 5 years, and he is what he is. It's always wait till next year. Greg says Indiana has the no-huddle offense. It's going to be close Saturday. They have great wide receivers. They got one.
Yes.
Really good wide receiver with a great name. Whop Fillier. Keith says fire him. Fire him after the season or tell him to find another job. It's sadly not working, and it never will. They can't beat OSU. That is what it's all about. The hell with any of these other games. I understand that frustration, Keith, and I'm with you. They can't beat Ohio State. And the whole thing is like heading into the season, I was like, you know what? I still think he's the best coach. And you know what? Even though he's lost 4 straight bowl games, and even though they can't win top 25 games on the road, I still think he's – I know say all that. It sounds crazy to say I thought he was the best coach still, but I did. But I don't feel like that right now. And after losing to Michigan State, so I do. If I had to pick right now, I think that Jim Harbaugh would leave and take an NFL job after this season.
Hit the road, Harbaugh. All right, let's turn the page to the third chapter. And that takes us to the Detroit Pistons. We haven't seen them since, March 11th.
Seems like 5 years.
Yeah, it's almost 8 months, but yeah, it does seem like 5 years. And we've got a lot of mock drafts coming out recently, and one thing that's been consistent is that the draft experts are starting to coalesce around LaMelo Ball, son of Lavar Ball, brother of Lonzo Ball, being the number one player in the draft. Obviously, the Minnesota Timberwolves have that pick. The Warriors, who had all those injuries, have the number 2 pick. Pistons all the way down at number 7. Now, does that mean that the Timberwolves are going to select LaMelo Ball? No. They could take somebody else. They could take James Wiseman, Anthony Edwards, anybody else. But they also could be thrown off by the comments made by Lavar Ball recently. Comments that involve your Detroit Pistons. Check out this video.
Okay. So let me ask you, man.
Yes.
So do you have any idea in regards to the draft where he's going to be going to? Can you give a little bit of a hint, a tiny bit?
You give a small hint. Like I said, I want it either in New York or Detroit.
Oh, not here.
Not here.
Not in L.A.
Not in LA.
Why?
Not right now. Not right now. Let me tell you what.
Okay.
The makeup that they have right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's not good for me. When they finish with the AD and LeBron era and all that, because check this out. Already had a son in LA.
Right.
With a raggedy ass coach. So it don't matter where you go. The key is to have the right coach behind you.
Tough words from LaVar Ball. Obviously, he doesn't view Dwayne Casey as a raggedy-ass coach, so that's a positive. But the Pistons have the number 7 pick. The Knicks, by the way, have the number 8 pick. If LaMelo is arguably the best player in the draft, the Pistons would have to trade up in order to get LaMelo Ball. Now, in terms of whether or not the Pistons would do something like that, Troy Weaver, the GM of the team, spoke to members of the media earlier this week. I think it might have even been earlier today. And he said that trading up was definitely an option. So, Dennis, would you trade up for LaMelo Ball? And if so, how high would you go?
Well, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't give up any future number ones to go up and get LaMelo Ball. But having said that, I know what his brother brings to the game, and I felt like he has a sixth sense of being able to pass the ball. LaMelo seems to be a lot like his brother. And, so maybe he is that special talent, but I'm not thinking that he's so special where I'm giving up a future number one. And if you're moving up, what else can you possibly give up? I mean, you're going to give up future number 2s to move up a spot or 2. I don't think anybody's doing that. It's going to take a future number 1. You're going to give up a future number 1 that's going to be lottery protected through 4 or 5, and then 3 years down the line it's not going to be protected. That's a very risky move. You know what? Killian Hayes looks pretty good. But you know what? It feels like the Pistons almost assuredly are going to take a point guard, and if LaMelo Ball and Killian Hayes are off the board, which could happen, they would have to settle for Tyrese Halliburton out of Iowa State, who looks like a nice player, but he doesn't look like he's anything that's great. Hayes and LaMelo look like those guys could be special, but I you know what? I can't see giving up a future one to move up to get either of those guys.
Yeah, look, I've made no secret that I want LaMelo Ball in a Pistons uniform. I've been begging for the Pistons to get in position to draft him for the last 3 or 4 years, ever since Lonzo and LaVar got on the scene. And I think that not only could he be a great player, and I like how the NBA community is coalescing around him being the top pick, but one thing that the Pistons fan base has lacked for years is buzz. I mean, there was a little bit of buzz 2 years ago when Blake Griffin had that all-star season and led them to the playoffs as the 8th seed, and then he got hurt like 2 games before the season ended, and then they got swept. But if they bring in LaMelo and Lavar Ball, and you got Lavar Ball sitting on the court for half the Pistons games, yelling at Dwayne Casey, coaching his son up, and things like that.
Well, I don't care about the raggedy ass LaVar Ball coming to town and his sideshow.
I do.
You know what?
The sideshow would bring interest to the team. I know that a lot of folks say, you know what, I don't care about him. He's a jerk. He's racist. He's sexist. And some of that stuff is true. But LaVar Ball brings eyeballs and attention. And we have not had that in Detroit.
Well, just come out and, light somebody's hair on fire before the game. Is that what you want? A sideshow, a clown show? Because that's what he is. I mean, look.
Yes, that's correct.
He has stayed away from Lonzo down when, he's been in New Orleans. You haven't really seen him. So hopefully he'll stay away from LaMelo. I don't want anything to do with Lamar. LaMelo, that's one thing. If he ends up being a great player, that's fine. But I want nothing to do with LaVar Ball. You know what? It's hard because we have the only tape that we've seen on him. You see some stuff from overseas or when he was on the AAU circuit where he was just taking goofy shots and jacking them up from all over the place. So it's really hard to get a read on what kind of player that he is. He
doesn't play defense. That's for certain.
No, and Killian Hayes is a little bit of the same way. But you know what? You look at him, you could see as a lefty point guard, he looks like, I know Manu Ginobili was not a point guard, but his game looks a hell of a lot like the former Spurs game. And you can just see that. He looks like he could be something special. So my position would be they're sitting there at their spot 7. If neither of these guys fall, LaMelo, unlikely. Killian Hayes could fall to them. If he does, you just snap him up. If not, I wouldn't sit there and take Tyrese Halliburton. The Celtics have those 3-1s. I saw that Rod Beard, your boy from the Detroit News, pointed out that maybe the Pistons could, move back and get, 3-1s. And maybe the Celtics would want to move up there if there was somebody that they coveted, which I guess is a possibility. And then maybe the Pistons could take one of those ones and parlay it and move back and get a couple 2s that they're also looking for. But, those are a couple of things that, are under consideration for the Pistons.
Yeah, actually, when he was asked about the potential of trading back and perhaps getting 2 or 3 of those Celtics picks, Troy Weaver said earlier today, we're definitely looking at everything. We're in a situation here where we're trying to get the best players and replenish the cupboard. Everything's on the table, so absolutely we would entertain that sort of scenario. But, when you look at the cupboard that the Pistons have, and you'd have to give up some of that covered if you want to trade up to get LaMelo Ball, which would be obviously the opposite of trading back. Number one, they don't have a second-round pick, so if a team wants to get some assets this year, they would not be able to do that outside of the Pistons' number 7 pick. But number two, I was looking at their roster and things like that. The Pistons' assets consist of the number 7 pick, future first-round picks, which you probably wouldn't want to do if you think the Pistons are going to be a really bad team. Sekou, who you probably don't want to get rid of so early. And then things really drop off when you look at Bruce Brown and Svi. But there is one other option that I think could be used to move up, and that is Luke Kennard. Kennard is going into the final year of his current contract. A team, now he did miss significant time last year with his injury. If a team wants to have his bird rights and they're not all that intrigued by the guys at the top of the draft, and they just say, we'll take whatever we have down at number 7, they might say, hey, you give us Kennard and we'll allow you to move up a few spots. Now, is that going to be enough to move up to number 1 where the Timberwolves have the top pick? I don't know. Would the Golden State Warriors be willing to move back from number 2 to get the number 7 and Kennard? I don't know. Number 3, Charlotte might say, hey, we don't need a point guard because we like Terry Rozier. We could use another shooter, and we'll move back 4 spots. But I think that Kennard would be the piece that you'd have to put out there in order to move up, whether it's 4, 5, or 6 slots.
I would do that.
Yeah. I would do it too. Anything else, Sekou, future first-round picks, no, I'm not interested.
I am interested in getting into that second round, that early second round, and picking up Cassius Winston. I think he's, I don't know about a star, but I think a nice player for a long time in the NBA that you can win with. And it's a lot like Draymond. I remember when Draymond Green was coming out and saying, you know what, I would not pick him in the first round, but I'd love to have him on my team. I feel the same way about Cassius Winston. So he's just somebody that you want to get, and if you can get him in this early second round, that seems like gold to me. I would be eyeballing Cassius Winston.
Well,
too.
Troy Weaver did mention that he would consider the possibility of purchasing a second-round pick or two. We know the Pistons and some other teams have done that in the past, so maybe they'll do that. But when it comes to drafting a point guard, the Pistons need a starter for the future. You mentioned Cassius could be a nice player. They need a player who, at the very least, could learn under Derrick Rose for a couple months before they trade him away or his contract expires to be the number one point guard. And then if they want to draft 2 point guards, that's fine. But Cassius should be the second one that they draft, not the first.
All right. No feedback on the Pistons. Let's see here. And no, here Keith is weighing in. Keith is an NBA guy. I'm sorry. You know what, Keith? I should have expected that you would have wanted to say something about the NBA. And here you are. He says, our sports teams in pro and college are so sad, but I'm looking forward to this true rebuild for the Pistons. But I don't know if I could stomach Lavar. What a knucklehead. I think drafting LaMelo would be cool, but I agree with Dennis. Not trading a number 1 to go up. I like Killian Hayes too, but more intriguing move would be to move Blake Griffin. And then he says he might finally have trade value of being healthy and his salary doesn't look as crazy now as the salaries have exploded the last few years.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to trade Blake Griffin. I've seen some, blogs and fan websites about trading Blake Griffin in trade scenarios. I don't know that that's feasible. But in terms
it is if you're going to be a straight up tanker. Like if you're looking to tank, you can get some bad. Like you could look and go to the Bucks roster and start taking some bad contracts. And
I think Blake has a player option for the season after this one.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you're going to trade for Blake Griffin, then you're going to trade for that gigantic contract plus all of the injury issues that he has with his knees for a season and a half or 2.
Yeah, you got to take really bad contracts back. And you know what, Piston fans, I don't know. Let's see what our new GM is going to be like. I think there's a possibility. I think that should be his approach. Troy Weaver should not be acting, in any of this hey, we got a playoff push.
I'm thinking from the other team standpoint, why would they want to take $38 million or whatever it is each of the next 2 years for a guy who might miss 38, 48, 58% of the games?
Well, a team like the Bucks are desperate to shake things up and to win, and they do have some contracts that are more than 2 years that you could balance out. You get into those trade machines, and I would imagine there's probably another team or two that are like that. I mean, teams have bad contracts that are for more than 2 years. And if you think, hey, we'll just gamble if we can get them for 1 year, then the following year, the contract becomes a benefit anyway. So, there is a chance here. I think Keith is right. Now, whether Weaver wants to fully indicate that this team's in a straight up tank job mode, that would obviously indicate it. If there was a deal, you traded Blake Griffin away for a bunch of chumps. Then you would know, which I would be okay with, because I think that's what they need to do for the next 3 years.
They did that with Drummond.
Yeah. Well, nobody wanted Drummond. We saw that.
With John Henson, Brandon Knight, and a future second-round pick in 2048. I mean, I'm still stunned that there was so little interest for Drummond around the league, that that's all they could get in return.
Yeah, I do think they could get some stuff, junk, for bad contracts for Blake. So could be a path there for a complete rebuild like Keith is talking about. All right, that gets us to the 4th chapter. And Chapman's favorite thing to talk about, COVID cancellations and COVID numbers.
Yeah,
he's got numbers, he's got graphs, he's got everything. He stays on top of all of these numbers and puts them into perspective. But we know that COVID has taken out Wisconsin here for 2 weeks. They've got Michigan a week from Saturday. People will be really interested in it then. We've got a Thursday night football game tonight where the 49ers are playing, and I don't know. They got a bunch of guys hurt. and they got a bunch of guys that are out because of COVID. They probably shouldn't have played this game tonight. This game's going to be kind of a joke.
Jamal Williams for the Packers has COVID too.
And the game's going to be kind of a joke, tonight, this Thursday night game. So the numbers are skyrocketing, and Chap, you're a little bit alarmed about this.
Yeah, I am, and I think a lot of folks out there should be. I'm going to post some numbers up so everybody can see what we've got. Here's a tweet from David Eggert of, I believe, the Associated Press. Yeah, the Associated Press. Michigan reported 5,710 new confirmed coronavirus cases today and 51 deaths. The previous record was 4,101 a day ago. So think about smashing yesterday's record by 40%. That's literally happening right now. Additionally, according to Henry Ford Health Systems, I'll put this tweet up as well. There are 2,300 people now hospitalized in Michigan with COVID-19 symptoms, and a doctor says it's definitely taxing all healthcare systems and hospitals across the state. And then you look at the Detroit Lions. They added a third player to their COVID-19 list in just this week, joining Jared Davis and Matthew Stafford. Earlier today, Jalen Elliott, never heard of him, might be a practice squad guy. He is on the COVID-19 list. Additionally, you look around the sports world, you got Cal versus Washington canceled this weekend. Tulsa Navy postponed. Ohio State basketball announced they're not going to be going to the crossover classic in South Dakota due to South Dakota's high positivity rate. And then going back to the NFL, I mean, there's just so many teams that are doing things virtually and on a hold right now. Check out this tweet from Kevin Seifert of ESPN. Today's additions to the NFL's attempts to play amid COVID-19: Bears pause activities, Texans close facility, Colts hold virtual meetings, Chiefs closing facility and meeting virtually after practice. That tweet right there consumes 1/8 of the NFL. Like, I look at all this, I look at 102,000 new cases across the country, which is a record. Going with Michigan setting a record yesterday and then smashing it today. I don't think we're going to have sports in December because these coronavirus numbers aren't sustainable. And if the leagues have the belief that if players are going to keep on testing positive, they're going to be held out. And if too many players test positive, they're going to be postponing or canceling games. There's no way that you can continue past around Thanksgiving at this rate if the numbers are bad right now and they're continuing to get a heck of a lot higher.
Yeah, you're right. Anything is possible here, the way this thing is going. So it's hard to predict. I know what you're saying. I don't think you're rooting for it. And I know that, people charge you for that. There's always a counter here. But that's why, as much as we can get mad at the games, you just enjoy this weekend's games and know that there might be it's like tonight. I was just bitching about the 49ers roster and, this, how their top 7 guys from last year's NFC Championship game are not going to be involved in the game. But I'm going to still, watch the games. If you like sports, enjoy them while they last, because as Chapman indicated just now, there could be another shutdown here on the horizon. That just isn't a little Chicken Little, by Chap here. There's a possibility of that. So it's there's a chance it could happen for sure.
And as a matter of fact, I saw another tweet about the college football season as a whole that said we've already had 44 games postponed or canceled, which constitutes 14.2% of all games. I know a lot of folks out there have been saying that college football's done a good job with managing this pandemic and managing the virus and allowing us to see games. How can it be a success if approximately 1 out of every 7 games so far has been postponed or canceled?
I don't know if it's you call it a success. A success is if you're able to get to the end of a season. Success is if you're not going to have people getting sick where you feel like it's going to be some lasting situation there. I mean, that's what it's about.
Like Wisconsin can't be labeled a success, and it's only 3 weeks in.
Again, no, it's not. But Wisconsin is a very good example here. It's like Barry Alvarez their athletic director, the former coach there, said, like, they came out, they looked great against Illinois. Graham Mertz threw those 4 touchdowns in the first half. Threw a fifth. He probably could have thrown 10 touchdowns. Wisconsin looked great. But you know what? When you have an outbreak, and even though they didn't actually go to the Big Ten red there that they were talking, where you have to shut it down, it quickly becomes, the games quickly become secondary. And it's just about the safety and the health of the students there. And so really they're just doing – it was always worth going out there and trying to do this, and it still is. And if you end up getting games canceled everywhere and you're not going to get a championship, well, you know what? I think I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that it might not work, and but it's still going out there and making an attempt to do it. Paul was just mentioning how hockey's starting. Michigan's going to play their schedule to November 11th. I mean, they might be just walking right into it. Who knows how many games that they'll get. So college basketball in 3 weeks. I mean, it's all out there. Baseball, was that a successful season? It was looking good until the final game, and then it kind of, fit right into everything else. So it's all different, new, crazy, all of that,
And it's still a
day by
shame
day,
to
week
me.
by week.
It's still a shame to me that we continue to try to, play through all this stuff as opposed to, as a society, trying to get rid of the virus so that you don't have to play through it. Like, in South Korea, they're still playing those games at 5 a.m. on ESPN, and they don't have any fans, and their numbers are so low that they're not worried about, are they going to have to shut down the league or shut down big parts of society and things like that. But we're still around here fighting about things like masks and, we need to have more than 50% capacity at the bar and all these other things. If we could just do what South Korea was doing, given that, we are still less interested in shutting everything down, we would have lots of fans in games right now. We would not be worried at least as much about, are we going to have games after Thanksgiving? But this is what we're seeing right now is a response, or is a result of what we've been doing for the last several months, which is for a lot of us next to nothing.
Well, Chad, unless there's an unfortunate turn of events, like I don't even know what it would be, somebody dying in sports on camera, or people dying in the streets. America's not ready to go back to any kind of shutdown. We're just going to work through it and see what happens.
Well,
there.
the Big Ten, they've been the most cautious about this of all. If there's going to be a conference that's playing right now that would decide to shut down, given how cautious they are, and given that the cases are so high in Big Ten country as opposed to like SEC country, they'd be the first to go down. Maybe.
All right, let's get to the 5th chapter.
Let's do so, and that takes us to the major wager, an opportunity for us to perhaps make you guys a little bit of money placing bets on sports. Dennis, what are you looking at?
Well, what I'm looking at is the way not to gamble. I've worked over 50 shows to get up $675, and I threw 400 of it away. I was riding big and start going big. It's not what you're supposed to do. You got to manage your bankroll. I didn't do that, so I lost 400 after building up 675 with great bats and picking and choosing which way to go. And, so now I'm only up 275, and I came back and put 200 on the Ravens on Tuesday, minus 1.5 on the road. Woo! So I could be down to 75. Well, I'm rolling to 75 today, and I'm going to take the Saints plus 4.5 against the Bucks. Is that Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football? One of the two. I think it's Sunday Night Football. Give me the Saints plus 4.
Are they going to have their receivers back?
Michael Thomas doesn't look like it.
What about Emmanuel Sanders?
Dicey.
All right, well, good luck with that. I think the Buccaneers might have Chris Godwin back for that game. So and
maybe Antonio Brown's playing too.
Yeah, so the for your pick, the Saints still might be without 2 receivers, and the Bucs might be getting 2 Pro Bowl receivers. Tuesday, I took the Bills plus 3. Obviously, those results are pending. I told you about my Lions story, so obviously nobody can go out there and take advantage of that because the game is off the board. But I did get the Vikings minus 4. Tonight, I've got the Packers on the money line. I don't know what the score is right now, But, the 49ers don't have Garoppolo. They've got some coronavirus issues. And, none of these other quarterbacks have actually played all that much worse than Garoppolo. So it might not be a huge drop-off. But I look at Rick Wagner and David Bakhtiari both being questionable with some injuries. There's a lot of question marks around this game. I just like the Packers to win. It's not going to be a big profit because it was minus 310 before the game started. But I like the Packers minus 310. Don't worry about the points. Just take the Packers to win.
All right, that's going to do it for another Fifth Chapter. Coming up on Tuesday, will Michigan be back in things, or will things really be reeling there in Ann Arbor? We'll get to that. We'll see just where the Lions are after a weekend or Sunday where they might not have their quarterback. We'll get to all of that Tuesday on the Fifth Chapter. Thanks for watching.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth